Hello everyone and welcome to Motorcyclegear.com. Today we are back on the 2024 Honda CBR1000RR. Let's go ahead and talk about the 5 things that I don't like about this bike. Welcome back to the channel everyone. Today I am back out on the 2024 Honda CBR1000RR and it's time to talk about the 5 things that I don't like about it. Now fair warning, this list is a bit skewed as it's not only 5 things I don't like about it, but also it includes the things that I don't like about it on the road. It'll make sense once I cover it, so let's just go ahead and jump in. Let's go ahead and squeeze through the middle here right quick and let's go ahead and jump in. So number 1 on my list of 5 things that I don't like about the 2024 Honda CBR1000RR is the fact that it has no actual gas gauge. What is going on with all these red lights? Alright, let's squeeze through one more time. Sounds like I feel like you just get every red light. Now it's really tight, really tight. Alright, a little bit more space. Let's get all the way through and yep, here we go. Okay. Alright, so if I'm wrong here or simply blind and can't see it, please let me know. But in my time with the bike, no matter what menu I was in, what changes I made to the settings, I could not find a gas gauge. Not a distance till empty, nothing. The only thing that I could notice was when you're about to be out of gas, the little yellow light warning turns on and that pretty much tells you that you're switching over to the reserve. Other than that, no idea where you stood when it comes to gas. And this dashboard is pretty advanced. It has a lot of settings, a lot of menus, a lot of options, and how it does not have a gas gauge, I don't know. I kind of like to plan my rides and knowing how far I can go before I have to stop, and that really makes a difference for me. So again, if I somehow missed it, let me know. But to me, a gas gauge is non-negotiable on a bike of this price, quality, ability, and tech. Simply, I am baffled that it doesn't have one. And you may say that it's a track weapon, not a street bike. Okay, well, even on track, I'd like to know how much fuel is left in the bike for many different reasons. For example, I don't want to run out of gas in the middle of a lap session, right? Or maybe I'm trying to figure out how much the bike weighs based off of fuel, or I'm trying to figure out, settings and testing for endurance racing, or whatever the case might be. It's still good to have that gas gauge. So a little bit confusing here for me. If you guys have any, thoughts on this or opinions, let me know down in the comments below, but just baffling to me that there's no gas gauge. Alright, so number 2 on my list of the 5 things that I don't like about the 2024 Honda CBR1000RR is going to be the components per dollar. Look, I'm not saying that the components on this bike are bad by any means. So far, I don't have many complaints or really any complaints at all when it comes to performance. But what I am saying is that a lot of its competitors, and even bikes costing less, have, for example, Brembos instead of Tokikos or Olins instead of Showa and so on. Now, the red light. Let's do some editing here. So the nice thing about editing is you guys have to sit through the red lights like I do. But anyway, let's move forward. So I guess my complaint here isn't necessarily that the bike doesn't have what it needs to be a good performing bike, but rather that the accounting and the marketing departments had too much say in the decisions being made. So for example, this bike is 2 to 3K cheaper than most other bikes in the leader bike category from direct competitors like Suzuki and Yamaha and so on. So why not spend that 2 to 3K and get those higher end components? Well, and that's going to be very simple. There's 2 main reasons for that. On one hand, you have Honda being able to say that their bike is cheaper and so they can hit a price point. This is where accounting got in the way. And then the second and more obvious reason is going to be marketing. If this bike is too good and has all the components mentioned, then it would basically be too close for comfort for the Fireblade SP and thus making that bike redundant. So again, in order for Honda to be able to have a Fireblade SP, this bike has to be limited to a certain standard. So again, I'm not saying that there is anything wrong with this bike or that its components are not good enough. I'm simply saying that I don't like that it was clearly held back in some categories just for the sake of marketing and accounting and to make sure the Fireblade SP reigns supreme. Alright, so moving on to number 3 on my list of 5 things that I don't like about the 2024 Honda CBR1000RR, and that is going to be comfort. Now, before I get into this, keep in mind this list is meant to be based off my riding experience, my riding needs, skill level, and style. I am fully aware that super sport bikes and hyper sport bikes are just not that comfortable, that they simply only care about one thing, and that's going to be performance, and if that means sacrificing comfort in exchange for shaving off 1 more second off a lap time, then so be it. So keyboard warriors, take a deep breath. I get it. I am not asking for this track weapon to be comfortable. What I am simply saying is that having ridden this bike back to back with Honda's own CBR650R, it is a night and day difference. The CBR650R is aggressive and sporty, but still I feel comfortable on it. I feel like I can take it out for a cruise and not have my back back hurt. It feels normal on the street, if that makes sense. The CBR1000RR is on a whole nother level. Right off the bat, you feel like you're laying on top of it, leaning forward and also down, kind of like you're going head first into your destination. Now again, this bike is perfect for track use, but for everyday use, it does get a bit tiresome. And if like me, you have any history of back issues, forget about it. Absolutely forget about it for long rides. All right, you guys, I had to stop and take a quick pit stop. Definitely needed some hydration and some food, so I pulled over for a second. Let's go ahead and hop back into where I was. So I guess my point here is not to say that again there's anything wrong with this bike, not at all. It's honestly amazing. It's to say that I don't like the ergos for daily and street use. And that's more than fair, as this bike isn't specifically designed for that, but rather designed for turning up the track. My further point is to say that if you have never ridden a bike with this aggressive a layout before, be sure to do so, and for an extended period of time, before committing to buying one and before committing to using one as a daily ride. Alright, let's go ahead and slide on through again. I gotta tell you guys, I love states that have lane filtering laws. Lane splitting is cool too, but like lane filtering at red lights, I feel like it should just be a thing everywhere. It just makes it so much easier to just move on to the front, and you know, by the time this light turns green, I'll be good and gone. Here we go. We're past the red light again. So number 4 on my list of 5 things that I don't like about the 2024 Honda CBR1000RR is the fact that there have been no major changes since 2017. This bike is due for an update. In my opinion, 7 to 8 years is too long for a refresh. In today's day and age, motorcycles and really everything is advancing at such a fast pace, especially tech and electronics, so it's hard to justify this bike being mostly unchanged for almost 8 years. And would you look at that, caught another red light. I am literally the king of red lights today. Here we go with some editing again. Alright, past that red light. I feel like I should keep track of how many red lights I can hit in one video. This is kind of getting crazy. Alright, so what I was saying was the Honda Rebel 1100T that I reviewed recently got some pretty significant updates only 2 to 3 years in, right? So I'm not talking about a full redesign, but still impactful changes nonetheless, right? So to have a bike that's over 15K and in such a cutting edge and performance sector, you would expect it to at least somewhat keep up with a cruiser of the same brand. But no, more or less Honda had for many years forgotten about their sports bikes, and unfortunately that is the case here. It's still all reasonable. For example, not as bad as the dash on the 2023 Honda CBR1000RR that I rode recently that looked like it was a throwback to the 80s, but still, when a bike is in the upper price range of a brand, you would expect it to stay current. But again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. Unfortunately, I think that accounting and marketing are getting in the way. When looking at sales figures, it's clear that lately super sport bikes, especially the more hardcore 600cc and 1000cc bikes, have not been selling as well, so most brands have not been giving them as much love and attention as before. So I do get it. I get that Honda is spending their budget updating bikes that are selling. That makes complete sense. I'm just saying that it's a shame, as it's such a great bike overall. It would be awesome if it was treated with Honda's best and latest. Alright, so last but not least, rounding out the list of 5 things that I don't like about the 2024 Honda CBR1000RR is going to be all the games, secrecy, and just weird stuff. Okay, so this isn't technically about the bike per se, but rather all the weird stuff happening around it. When I do these reviews, regardless of what brand I'm working with, whether it's Suzuki, Husqvarna, Triumph, and even Honda themselves, I normally receive a press kit with each bike. This gives me access to important information, important specs for each bike, for example, the different components in the suspension, or weights and dimensions, color options, pricing, so on. Pretty much all the details that I need to do a good and thorough review. One of the things that I'm specifically needing, especially in the first video of each bike, is how big is the motor, and I mean specifically to the actual cc's, not the advertised number, right? Because a lot of times they'll say liter bike, but it's like 998 or 999, whatever the case might be. I need to know the horsepower, the torque, and the weight. Typically, it is pretty easy to find. In fact, all the bikes that I've reviewed so far, I really have had no issues. Well, that's true until now. For whatever reason, this bike seems to be all sorts of secret and mixed up. For example, I know that it's a CBR1000RR. It is a liter bike. But what is the actual cc's of the engine? Well, most liter bikes are not actually 1000 cc's on the nose, like I said. For this bike, I've seen it say 998 cc's, I've seen it say 999 cc's, and I've seen it say 1000 cc's. and even 1001cc. So which one is correct? Who knows? I've seen it all over Honda's own website. It shows 3 different numbers. I've seen it in press releases all over the place. All right, skipping one more red light. Here we go. So super strange that it just isn't known. And then next is going to be the torque and horsepower numbers. Simply put, I just cannot find them anywhere. You can find the Fireblade version of this bike, super easy, but this bike particularly, not a chance. After much hunting, I have seen numbers ranging from 165 to 176 to 185. Who knows which one is actually accurate, as none of the Honda documentation seems to mention it, and the same goes for the torque number as well. It really seems like all the emphasis and focus is on the Fireblade variant. That too is the problem. The Fireblade seems to have multiple versions with multiple power outputs depending on where it's being sold. Asian markets, Europe, and USA all seem to have different figures, and they are as far apart as 185 all the way up to 215. That is a solid 30 horsepower difference, which is nothing to sneeze at, and I think therein lies the problem. Well, apparently this Tesla has somewhere to be, because this lady's been telling me this whole time, so hopefully she gets to her destination. Alright, one more edit of a red light, and here we go. If in Europe, for example, the Fireblade makes 215 horsepower and the regular 1000RR makes 185, that is totally fine. When you pay more for the better bike, you say, hey, it was worth it, I got the 30 extra horses and better components. But the question is, what happens when your Fireblade is US spec and only ends up getting 185 horsepower? This is going to be the same number presumably as a regular 1000RR in Europe. Well, from a marketing standpoint, you can't have that. You can't have the Fireblade and the 1000RR making the exact same horsepower, right? So this is where things get complicated. So again, not directly a problem with this bike, but rather a problem with Honda doing some weird region stuff and weird marketing stuff, and I wish it was all just simple, and at the end of the day that the data was clear and easily accessible. So again, nothing wrong with the bike, but super annoying that there's all this cloudiness and weird stuff going on. This might be a record for how many red lights I've hit in one ride. You guys are lucky there's editing, because otherwise I think half this video would have been just me sitting at red lights. Alright guys and gals, that's it for the 5 things that I don't like about the 2024 Honda CBR1000RR. Now be sure to visit Motorcyclegear.com, as we would love to help you out with your motorcycle gear needs. You can also hit us up via phone or email, and if you'd like to share your thoughts on this video or the CBR1000RR, feel free to drop a comment down below. Thank you all for watching. Till next time.